Hello, and welcome to the second installment of Fenimore Art Museum's program, The Fight for Recognition, a series of discussions featuring three of the artists featured in As They Saw It, Women Artists Then and Now, currently on view at the Fenimore in lovely Cooperstown, New York. My name is Danielle Henrici. I'm the Director of Education for Fenimore Art Museum and the Farmers Museum, and I am delighted to be your moderator for this evening's program. As They Saw It, Women Artists Then and Now honors the remarkable vision, creativity, and achievements of American women artists working across 3 centuries. The exhibition emphasizes varied experiences and approaches to art making while pushing back against the underrepresentation of women in the arts. The over 60 works on view showcase how women, despite social, economic, and cultural barriers, express their identities and shape their herstories through artistic expression. Drawn from the collections of 3 partner museums, the Springfield Museums, the Museum of Fine Arts Boston, and Fenimore Art Museum, As They Saw It is one in a series of American art exhibitions organized through a multi-year, multi-institutional partnership led by the Museum of Fine Arts Boston as part of the Art Bridges initiative. Many thanks to the Art Bridges Foundation for its support of the educational programs associated with As They Saw It, including tonight's discussion. And now that you know a bit more about the exhibition, I would like to introduce you to the artists. Kyra Hicks is a self-taught, skilled crafter of original story quilts. Her quilts have been included in such prestigious venues as the American Craft Museum in New York, the Smithsonian Institution's Renwick Gallery in Washington, D.C., the Wadsworth Atheneum Museum of Art in Hartford, Connecticut, and of course, Fenimore Art Museum. She loves historical, investigative research and rediscovering the lives of quilters past. She is the author of Black Threads, an African American Quilting Sourcebook, the children's book, Martha Ann's Quilt for Queen Victoria, and This I Accomplished, Harriet Power's Bible Quilt and Other Pieces, and other books. She lives in Arlington, Virginia. Kyra's piece, Black Barbie, is included in the As They Saw It exhibition and is part of Fenimore Art Museum's collection. Carla Hemlock is a textile and mixed media artist from the Ganawage Mohawk territory. Her work aims to initiate conversations on historical, political, environmental, and social issues. Her works have been exhibited in Canada, the United States, and internationally. Her works are in private, corporate, and public collections, including the Smithsonian American Art Museum, Smithsonian National Museum of the American Indian, Boston Museum of Fine Arts, Montreal Museum of Contemporary Arts, and Fenimore Art Museum. She lives, works, and has her studio in Ganawage. Carla's piece, Indigenous Reality, is included in the As They Saw It exhibition and is also from Fenimore Art Museum's collection. Texas-based Pakistani-American artist Ambreen earned her BFA in Traditional Indian and Persian Miniature Painting from the National College of Arts in Lahore, Pakistan, and her MFA from the Massachusetts College of Art and Design in Boston, Massachusetts. She has exhibited her work globally, including at the National Museum of Women in the Arts, the Brooklyn Museum, and the Museum of Fine Arts, Boston. Her awards include the Brother Thomas Fellowship, the Maud Morgan Prize, ICA's James and Audrey Foster Prize, and the Joan Mitchell Foundation Award. Her work is in collections like the Museum of Fine Arts, Boston, Harvard Art Museums, and the Library of Congress. Ambreen is represented by Gallery Wendy Norris. Ambreen has 2 pieces from her Daughters of the East series in the As They Saw It exhibition that come to us from the MFA Boston. Kyra, Carla, and Ambreen, thank you so much for being here. I have a quick note for those tuning in live. The discussion will run about an hour, and then we will open it up to questions from the audience. Please post your questions in the chat and feel free to do so as you think of them. I will scroll through and get to as many as I can. And now, without further ado, let's get started. I think a great place to start would be if each of you took a few moments to talk about yourself and your artwork. So Carla, would you like to start?
You're on mute, Carla.
Did it again. Here we go. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All good? All right, great. My name is Carla Hemlock. I am Mohawk from Kahnawake. A little bit about my work. I'm a textile and mixed media artist. My first love was always to make quilts. But I also do lots of different types of work. I do a lot of different types of garments, clothing, but those clothing have a message in them. I also do cradle boards with my husband. So I do a variety of work, and that's me.
Great. Kyra, would you like to go next?
Certainly. And thank you so much for having me. And thanks also to the Arts Bridges program. Appreciate it. My name is Kyra Hicks, and I'm a quilter. And I'm also a quilt historian. And I love to investigate and research quilters' past. My quilts are primarily story quilts. They're probably like reading a diary a little bit. I haven't quilted in a number of years, primarily because I started to do research, and there's only one dining room table. And so there's just so much room in the house to do art or research and so forth. In addition to the quilting and the research, I am also a book artist, and I've been researching the last several years pop-up books, pop-up and movable books. I'm in Los Angeles right now, my childhood home, visiting my mom, whose birthday was this week. Hello, my mother.
Happy birthday.
But otherwise, I live in Arlington, Virginia. And aside from the quilting and the research, by day, I am a senior director of marketing insights at a trade association in Washington, D.C.
Oh, wow, amazing.
Thank
Okay.
you.
And then Ambreen.
So hello, thank you for having me in this wonderful discussions. I'm looking forward to it. So as my name is Ambreen, but I grew up in Lahore, Pakistan, and that's where I started my art education. I did my undergraduate degree at the National College of Arts in Lahore, and came to United States in the early 90s to pursue my master's at the Massachusetts College of Art and Design. And my MFA degree is in general fine arts, painting, installation, and printmaking. And I had been working as an artist since then, and I lived in Boston for 23 years, started my career there as an artist. And then 8 years ago, I moved to Dallas, Texas. And so I have a studio here, work from Dallas, and I've been just showing around and working around. I don't know if there's anything else. I'm sorry, I just I wasn't able to get online and get myself unmuted, so it just happened. So I'm not sure if there's anything else I need to say. But
No, that's perfect. That's great. Thank you all for introducing yourselves. So I am launch into some questions for you. Each of you creates work using materials or processes that are traditionally known as being used by women. Kyra creates quilts, Carla works with textiles and beads, and Ambreen often incorporates sewing into her mixed media artworks. So here's the question. What to you is the significance of these materials and processes in both the art making and in the meaning of the final product? Who'd like to go first? Kyra? Awesome.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Um, it's interesting. I quilt not to be a quilter. I quilt to tell stories. So I'm not an artist in that, I'm not a trained artist, so I don't paint. I don't do sculpture. But if I have a story that's in me that I have to come out, it has to come out. I have found that using fabric and threads is the best way that I can do that. And part of it was that 7 years that I spent at Hemlock Cards on the business side and marketing and product development. It's the telling of the story and the getting it out of my system. And it's being able to use things that are accessible, really. And going to Joann Fabrics or going to Walmart in their fabric department, the fabrics are affordable and accessible. And those happen to be the tools that I use.
Ambreen, would you like to?
Yeah, so the materials that I use, they hold a significant symbolic meaning in my practice. I cut, I rip, I draw, paint, stitch, prepare my surface with tea stains, and I also print with flowers that I grow in my garden. So each kind of practice is a sort of, it's like a laborious ritual, and it kind of resonates with the traditional role of women nurturing, mending, and sewing at home. So my work basically it addresses issues of war and violence. And these are kind of heavy loaded themes. So symbolically, I bring these kind of broken pieces of the society into my studio, process them through these laborious rituals, these mediums, and create something completely new to present back to the world, basically. So even though I was trained in a very highly structured and stylized art form in my undergrad, but my practice is not limited to just making of the paper or painting on the surface. Any little experience that I have, it adds on another layer into my work. So anything can be material for me. I don't have to go and buy materials in the art shop. Anything can be materials.
And then Carla.
Yeah, I've also gravitated toward fabrics, beads, beadwork, and I find that if I'm going to be presenting an issue, I find it really comforting to do it in either a form of a quilt or even a garment, or it even can be a baby cradle board. And because these are all very comforting, non-threatening objects. But when you get closer to the work, you're going to be stopped, and you're going to maybe have to ask yourself some questions about the topic. And I found it interesting in my work meeting with other people who would not normally engage in conversations, say about residential school children in mass graves, on fracking, on the Washington Redskins name. These are some conversations that people have a hard time to talk about. But when you approach my work, which is a very non-threatening quilt, that's when conversations begin. So I've chosen those materials because, it's very non-threatening.
Yeah, that seems to be a kind of a through line That's really interesting. Okay, so here's a question specifically for Kyra. Um, your quilt, Black Barbie, was made in 1996, and it makes a very pointed comment about missing African American representation in the world of this ubiquitous pop culture icon and children's toy. It is now, do I know what year it is? It is now 2024. Do you feel that progress has been made since that time?
Yeah, I do. I do feel there's been progress. Carla, what I think was interesting, I wrote it down. You said that quilts were non-threatening in some aspects, and I agree with you. And I used that approach to do this particular quilt, Black Barbie. I was working at Hallmark Cards on the marketing side in keepsake ornaments. And so I was responsible for the product line of the magic ornaments and so forth. And there had been a discussion on Hallmark, which had the license to do Barbie ornaments and the Barbie Christmas doll that comes out every year, to do an ornament based on the doll. And my manager had mentioned that we should do the Black Barbie Christmas ornament. And I was horrified. I was angry. I was a lot of things, because I thought, as a major corporation that deals with holiday symbols and so forth, that our responsibility was to do pop culture, but to also be authentic to our customers. And one of those segments of customers are African American, and we needed to make sure our product line had Black Santa Clauses, that it had Black angels, before we put in the line a Black Barbie Christmas doll. And so this quilt was my being able to work through that feeling of, how do I tell my manager that's a horrible, I mean, I eventually did tell my manager that was a horrible idea, to not do Black Barbie Christmas before you did Black Santa Christmas ornaments. But this was my being able to shout through fabric to say, it was never intended to me. It was so hard to even find Black Barbie dolls or Black dolls. How dare this company do this iconic thing ahead of the basics for the Christmas holiday, if that makes sense. So while I was trying not to be threatening, when you think about it, look, I mean, the border colors, who can be threatened by the florals there, right? And for those who don't know, the swimsuit that this particular Barbie doll is wearing is a take on the very first Barbie doll. And that was the costume that very first Barbie doll was wearing, was the black and white swimsuit. And behind the text that you're able to read straight on is painted over and over again, all the way down. Black Barbie has no name is what's painted behind there, just repetition. And I will admit here on this call, the reason why at the top, you know, what, 4/5, you can't really see that repetition in paint, but you can underneath the words "never intended for me," is because that was the next day. And my paint, I couldn't get the right colors. And so you'll see the change in colors now, because it's I was trying, I just couldn't repeat that lighter pink in the background. But that's Black Barbie. And when you think about it, you asked, does it resonate 28 years later from when I stitched it? I think so. I think it's held up. And some of you who have a subscription to Netflix, just a couple weeks ago, they introduced a new a documentary program called Black Barbie. And it looks at the history of Black Barbie and the dolls and the designers and the fight to get Mattel to actually create and market Black Barbie dolls, and then obviously other kind of dolls of diversity.
Yeah, so actually I had the opportunity to watch that just last night.
Uh-huh.
There was a line toward the end that I loved, and it was when they didn't see what they wanted, they made it.
Yes.
I loved that line, and it sort of reminds me of your artwork as well, in a sense.
Well, thank you. It's, if you
Yeah.
haven't seen the documentary, it really is a very interesting program. And one of the experts that they have on there is Dr. Patricia Turner. She's a folklorist and so forth, but she's also a quilter. So I just had to do a shout out for another quilter who's on that program.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much, Kyra.
Sure.
Carla, I have a question for you here. So in the booklet that was produced by the Springfield Museums when, as they saw it, was on view there, you write about the inspiration for your work, Indigenous Reality. It was about a 37-year-old mother of 7 and her tragic experience in a Canadian hospital. So could you share that story with us and how it led to the work that's in the exhibition?
Sure. I had just finished a huge piece of work for an institution, and I thought I was just, every time I finish a work, I always have some downtime. Um, and I had prepared to have some downtime. And I put on the television and on the news stations came this story about this young woman, a 37-year-old Indigenous woman, um, who went to the hospital for just a very minor, um, uh, I guess, a minor incident or something. So she goes to the hospital, but instead of being met with treatment to help her, she was a victim of systemic racism, which you could not even imagine. Um, she was doing everything to call out for help, and it just wasn't happening. So what she ended up doing was taking her phone. She took her phone, and unbeknownst to the hospital personnel who were supposed to be treating her, she started live streaming what was happening to her in the hospital room. And anyone can go on, because I think the family asked for the video to stay up. Her name was Joyce Echequan, and you can probably find it, her video. And it's actually very heartbreaking to watch. But she filmed the last minutes of her life. And she filmed, instead of receiving treatment, the most horrible, horrible things were said to her for being an Indigenous woman. Like, you should die. And it was, when I watched it, I couldn't believe I was watching it. And this was 2020. That's not too long ago. And when it happened, I was floored. And something hit me so hard that I just started pulling out all of my materials. And I said, I have to document this. I have to put this down, because like anything else, her story will just fade away, and you'll be on to the next story. And I didn't want her to be forgotten. I didn't want what happened to her to be forgotten, because she is not the only one, but she had something was in her to say, no one's going to believe me, because she died. She died in that room. And she said, she had to have said, no one's going to believe me, and I need to record this. And she did. She did. So when I made this, this was probably one of the fastest works that I made. Um, I probably cried more than half doing it. I just it because it kept going on our television stations for for weeks on end, even a year, 2 years, because of all the lawsuits and everything. So this took me a matter of weeks to do. Uh, yeah, this was done in a matter of weeks. So I did put in there, um, you know, systemic racism, extermination policies, viral videos. If you look in the center of the quilt, it has words like, um, on the sides there's honor, pride, dignity, and love. And that's what she carried with her. That's what all Indigenous people carry with them. So when you go to a hospital, you're not going there um, to die from someone's dislike of who you are as because you're Indigenous. So that's why I made this.
It's heartbreaking. Thank you for sharing that. And then Ambreen, Ambreen, in the As They Saw It booklet, you contributed a beautiful poem titled International Women's Day. Would you be willing to share that poem with the audience and then expand on its meaning?
Sure, sure. Let me just give 1 second. I'm going to open it up. So that poem actually, it was a response to one of my own painting from the series I Need a Hero from 2005. Yes, that's the one. So I shared the painting on the Instagram on International Women's Day a couple of years ago, and it kind of re-inspired me to write a few words about that. But I just want to give a little background on the series because each of my work is connected with with the series. So I Need a Hero was a series that I did in 2005, and at that time, I was exploring the historical representation of the female body in the genre of miniature painting. And this a female figure, the female heroine or Naika, the protagonist in the Mughal miniature paintings, it was the female that was imagined by the male artists of Indian subcontinent, centuries ago. And these figures, they embodied a very passive and unchallenging notion of womanhood, unlike the male heroes of Persian miniature paintings, like Amir Hamza or Rustam and Sohrab. These are some of the characteristics you find in Persian miniatures. Actually, in fact, there was a show, I think it was at the Brooklyn Museum a few years, actually many years ago. It calls The Adventures of Hamza Nama. So there were all these large scale manuscripts on the adventures of this Persian hero, which is a character which was idealized by the Persian artist, which is actually an Arab character. Um, uh, so, 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 at that time, I just couldn't find any female representation that actually represented the female itself. They were all through the gaze of male artists, and then so in these paintings, my protagonist is seen actually through the gaze of a female artist, which is myself, and and she's presenting the way she is. And she's a brave warrior, and she's a true hero, and she's seen in this series fighting with demons with a sword in her hand, like in a Kill Bill style. And then so in this particular piece, she's seen carrying a world on her back, it's like a water world on her back, and in which there is a clone of herself, which is seen hiding in a kind of like a fetal position, while the fish in the water world symbolizes freedom and exploration. So she seems to have kind of taken on the burden on her of her choice, uh, uh, but in the process, she's also standing alone, and yet she is the role model for many other women who are actually looking up at her. So I kind of pulled out this piece like after almost 18 like 20 years, and then I said, I kind of reinterpreted it in my own the kind of new way, and I just wrote these words because it was an International Women's Day. And so the words go like this. Uh, they will tell you so many things. If you listen to them, they'll fill you like an empty vessel with the poison of their expectations. And before you know it, you'll be carrying the burden on your shoulders that is not yours in the first place. And if you summon courage and refuse to submit to their ideologies, they'll call you names or patronize you. But you will fight, never to stop again, with the pen to give them your peace of mind, with the paintbrush to show them your true colors. You will rise with the burden on your back of your lonely but uncorrupted, uncompromised self. So that's it. Yeah.
It's really beautiful. And I think probably resonates very deeply with a lot of women. Did you want to share anything about your Daughters of the East pieces? Well,
Sure. Do we have image to show, or?
Think so. Do we have the images? Maybe not.
Okay. So the Daughters of the East, it's a
There they
suite.
are.
Yeah. So it's a suite of 5 prints, etchings. They're very, very meticulously done. I did them in 2008 at Wingate Studio up in New Hampshire, where I remember I used to drive 2 hours, would drop my 3 years old in daycare, drive 2 hours, go and work intensely 6 hours, and come back and pick her up. So it kind of went on for several months. This was a time when I actually made a trip back to Pakistan in the year before, in 2007, where after 12 years of living in the United States, so things had changed. There is a lot of political unrest there, and besides, other crazy things going on, there was this one whole event that had happened, that there was a mosque in Islamabad, which I remember my husband saying that he kind of grew up going for private prayers to that mosque, but somehow it kind of got um, uh, controlled by some kind of radical clerics, and it had 2 schools, like for boys and girls, and then they started kind of brainwashing these kids. So I did not know much about it, but I saw an image in the news about with these women, all covered in black burqas with the batons in their hands, and it was a very kind of shocking and threatening image at first. You see, it's not a very common sight. Like when I was growing up, it was not a common sight to see a lot of women wearing burqas and with the baton in their hand. So you'd see one person covered, and you have a different kind of image about that person, what that person would be like, or behind the veil. But here they were all together, and so I kind of built that series based on that image that I found, and I juxtaposed it with the image of like hundreds of ladybugs, which I actually happened to have witnessed. One day I just opened my door and I saw like thousands of them and I remember always seeing ladybugs as such a, it has a very kind of sweet uh, meaning, it like brings good luck. And that's what I remember hearing. And it's a very kind of a harmless little bug. But seeing them all together, it was very threatening, it was kind of, almost like, it's an infestation. And so I chose to juxtapose these two images of uh, the ladies with the batons and the ladybugs, and I call it ladybugs. Um, um, so basically, for me, seeing the image, like, for a Western person to see a one woman wearing a veil, it's a different kind of interpretation for them. They're like, you'd always think that, she's this one uh, a Muslim woman, oppressed Muslim woman from that part of the world. But altogether, so I think their identity were more visible in their being together instead of being, as one person. Like, uh, so what they were doing was they were protesting. They were part of the radical kind of a group, and they kind of started acting like a moral police in the society. And they came in with their batons protesting against the government that certain things that they should be doing and they weren't doing. In any case, I think the intentions were not in the right place. But what I found was very interesting and fascinating. First of all, there's no identity. We don't even know who they are, which I learned later that these were all young girls for very tender age, 18 years to 20 something years old. And they had been very much influenced by those radical teachings. And but what fascinated me was, like, they're still people and they still have their own thinking process. And so their unity, their coming together, uh, was what, like in that image, was what was and I found was very intimidating. So, and then I have like this whole series of the the narrative kind of evolved from that image of that several of these women, and then zooming into one slowly. So the one on the right, it's the last of that the series Daughters of the East, where she's seen unveiled, and she looks, her identity is in some ways revealed by her face being unveiled, and she looks very vulnerable. Like, so here as an individual, there is vulnerability, and in being together there is strength. And then behind her, because ultimately what had happened was that there was a military siege in that mosque, and a lot of these young girls ended up dying. It was a very tragic incident. And then, so I had these image of these turbans and the helmets in the background. They kind of colliding in the background. It almost looked like some sort of like a swarming or a blast, something blasting in the background. And the image of um, a woodpecker, uh, is pecking on the wood that she was relying on, like all her strength and empowerment, which was like the false sense of empowerment, was relying on this kind of weapon that she's kind of, was using. Here it's just a piece of wood which is being pecked by the woodpecker. And so I think it's a lot more complex than like how I'm explaining it. But generally that's what it is. And I think, when I was talking to Martina, and I know she's planning on putting it in the context of uh, the network, the unity, and being together. So that's the lens she saw it through. So it's about infestation, it's about vulnerability, it's about delicacy at the same time. So
each of the pieces has such a story behind it, and such a moving story. Have people ever pushed back about the topics in your work? And this is a question for all of you. Have people pushed back against the topics in your work, and how do you respond to that?
Oh, I don't want answering that. Absolutely, I've been confronted with some of my work. And you expect it, because if you were not confronted, then you didn't do your job. That's how I look at it. If they just walk on by and not stop and maybe challenge me, I want to be challenged on my work. I want them to feel something. And I'm actually, I'm quite pleased when they do. A good example was the Washington Redskin. I did a quilt on that. And that was really interesting because I presented that in Washington, D.C. And I had lots of Redskins fans come by, and we had some really great discussions. And they all walked away with a better knowledge of, yeah, maybe they shouldn't have that name. I did a fracking quilt, and boy, that was so interesting because I actually had, I presented that in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and I had some of the Texas oil people come by who were not happy about it and who literally said, "You are misrepresenting our industry." And I invited them in to say, well, let's talk about this. And after a 20-minute conversation, I just looked at them and I said, well, isn't this interesting that we're talking about a quilt? And, I can go on about other works that I presented. And I think it's great to have that dialogue because it means that maybe you pushed a little bit of buttons. And yeah, so I think it's great.
I agree with you, Carla. I had a quilt that was dealing with interracial dating, and it was a Black woman in the center, but let's just say it was me in the center. And on one side was a Black man, and the other side was a white man. I was fully clothed, looking fly, and they were both nude, in part because I was tired of seeing artwork with the women always nude. And so this was kind of my being fun with that concept. And your comment about it's a quilt that engages conversation. When I was making it, it was on the floor so I could do the layout. It was the only space that was big enough for a queen size quilt. And my brother was visiting me in Arlington, Virginia. He came in and he saw it, and he got so angry that I would represent Black men nude and the whole topic. He was so angry. And I'm like, Charles, it's a quilt. It's cotton. Bring it down a little bit. But I thought it was hilarious that he was that angry. Two other things on that quilt. It was exhibited at the Renwick. And in terms of engaging conversation, when I went to the museum, it was saying hello to the guards, and I'm like, oh, I have a quilt in this show. And they asked me which one, and I told them, they're like, you're the one who did that, And I think it was just the subject matter, the unusual subject matter in a quilt that got the conversation going. I do remember that quilt was another quilt of mine that had a nude woman in it. I was so hesitant. That was probably the only, it was in a catalog as well. That was the only catalog I never sent my parents because I didn't want my father to, I know that my parents would then buy the catalog and give to their friends and all that kind of stuff. And so I didn't want my father to feel embarrassed giving a nude quilt image to his friend. And I'm like, I am an adult, but that really mattered to me. So, well, I can stitch the quilt. It mattered to me what my parents thought. So I think in that sense, I self-censored myself. But it is hilarious and wonderful and engaging to see people who look at the work say something.
Yeah. Ambreen, did you want to add anything to that?
Sure. So I think for me, I use so many different materials to kind of basically invent my own techniques to do whatever I do. And this is the reason that I do that is because for me, I think having the viewers stand in front of the work, not react, but just stand there and then take whatever they can take with them wherever they go. I think that's the most important thing for me than their reaction. So I use aesthetics as, and the beauty is one of the tools that I persistently, purposefully, consciously use in my work because my issues are the issues that I deal with there are so loaded and difficult. It's not easy to have the viewer stand in front of them. It's something that nobody wants to even watch in the news. And so I have to rely on aesthetic and a beauty, which was one of the main biggest characteristics in my training as a miniaturist, because there is tremendous beauty and aesthetic in the making of miniature painting. This is one of the main element. And I just never want to, this is integrated in my system that it has to be this way. And I've done many, many disturbing works on disturbing issues, very controversial issues. And thankfully, so far, I mean, yes, people have come up, but they come up with with the mode of communication. They want to learn more because they find it's a different angle in looking at something. For instance, I just recently had a show in the fall at my gallery, and it was all about, interpreting the Second Amendment, right, and the gun violence in this country. And I live in Texas. It's not something that is easily, that kind of a stance is easily taken. But whoever has come in to see it, I've sat down and had conversations with them, and I learned their perspective. I also understand it. I may not agree with it, and so, but we do end up taking something from each other, and it informs my work a lot. That's so. So yes and no. That there's been pushback, and but I do what I have to do. I don't change what I have to do. I might change my vocabulary a little bit, like depending on the audience that I'm showing to. For instance, I would not do certain things or say certain things in a certain way if I was showing in Pakistan. I did a series of works about a blasphemy law, which is a notorious law in Pakistan, which has caused a lot of violence in the country. I did that, and people ask me, "Oh, aren't you scared? Don't you feel scared? Like, it's not it's not an easy topic. You can't just like say something and feel safe, And I said, I'm not showing it. If I was showing it in Pakistan, I might be using a different kind of vocabulary. I would still do it, but it may be a different vocabulary that is easier for that particular audience to understand, because my purpose is for the audience to take something from the work and not feel kind of, uh, kind of not evoke a strong reaction. So, but people work different, for differently. So that's the way I work.
Okay, so here's another question for all of you. And This conversation is amazing, and we're already approaching an hour. So I'm going to put it to you, and we'll keep moving along. But a 2019 study by ArtNet of 26 prominent American art museums showed that during the preceding decade, only 14% of exhibitions and just 11% of acquisitions were of work by female artists. And in 2019, the National Endowment for the Arts reported that while nearly half of the visual artists in the United States are women, on average, they receive 74 cents for every dollar made by their male counterparts. So what is your reaction to those statistics? If anybody wants to take that one.
We'll see.
Kyra or Ambreen?
Yeah, I'll go. I'm not surprised. When I first started quilting, I looked up very much to Faith Ringgold, who has a piece in the exhibit. And one of the reasons why, when I read about and I learned about Mrs. Ringgold, and I eventually did meet her in person, was her activism and protesting, not only for African Americans to be included in museum exhibits. Yes, this is her dancing on the George Washington Bridge that's in the exhibit, but her activism on behalf of Black artists and women artists to be included in museum exhibits as well as in their permanent collections. My first book was called Black Threads, and it's a source book on African American quilting and quilt making. And one of the things that I did, one of the chapters, is I did as much as I could do, I sent letters to hundreds of museums asking, did they have African American made quilts in their permanent collections? And this was back in 2005, 2006, when I did that. And it was trying to replicate a study of American quilts in museums that the Library of Congress, the American Folk Art Department did. And they were able to identify in the late 80s, like 130 quilts in museums collections. So come up, 2 decades almost later, and I was able to identify nearly 600 quilts, about 585 quilts, African-American made quilts in 100 different museums. Representation is important, and I just think we continue to have to fight or show our work, or show our work to acquisitions committees and so forth, to be included. So I'm not surprised at the statistics there.
Yeah, absolutely. Likewise, when I read about that, and I was like, it kind of literally confirms that it's not a coincidence, or it's not like, oh, we never really thought about it from this angle. It's like it certainly confirms our fears, and that there is a system out there which is biased against women, a system that limits the rightly deserved recognition and financial opportunities for female artists. And in order to address this issue, we have to have a parallel system that requires intentional efforts from museums, galleries, and art institutions to promote gender equality and ensure that female artists receive the visibility and compensation they deserve. And not just female artists, but there is a whole spectrum within that gender inequality. It's like, the women of color are probably on the bottom of that the list. So, but there has been hope, certainly. I think, in 2019, it was 2019 when Baltimore Museum announced that they're going to only buy women artists' work for the whole year. That was a good, very concrete commitment. And I think that kind of commitment we need. I'm sure I've been hearing from some curators, and the museums are interested in buying more more women artists or representing, or highlighting women in their exhibitions. So I think there was also another exhibition at the Cincinnati Art Museum a few years ago, 2019, similar to our show here, where they had highlighted all the women artists in from their own collection from 17th century to the present day. And so I think there has to be more and more of that. And that's why I love going to the National Museum for Women in the Arts. It's one of my favorite museums in the country, where you see everybody that I love all in one place. Um, um, Certainly, yes. So, but we have a long way to go to catch up on the centuries old uh, kind of, unfairness and discrimination.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Carla, have you seen a change in representation over recent years?
What a really good question. And we have like very little amount of time to talk about this.
You can keep going.
You know, uh, for Native American women, we're kind of at the bottom of that ladder when it comes to representation in major institutions. And, you just have to go there and see. And it's really quite rare that you're going to see Native Americans in there. And it's only recently, within, I would say, the past 5 years, that our work now is finally getting some of the recognition that it needs. In 2019, the Minneapolis Institute of Art, under the direction of Jill Alberg, gathered together Native American women and just various scholars in the field of their art. And she called us all together. I was one of the ones that she had asked to be on board with Terry Greaves, who was one of the co-curators. And this was the conversation. Exactly this. It's, our work has been out there since pre-contact, but there has not been really any major exhibition of Native American work or Native American women work. So there was an exhibition called Hearts of Our People that came out in 2019. From there was a survey done of work that was pre-contact. We had some pottery, we had baskets, to the present. And it was just an amazing exhibition. It traveled. It ended up in the Smithsonian. It ended up at, it traveled to various venues. But that was one of the first times that there was an actual exhibition of Native women artists. Why did it take so long? We can't answer the questions, but I imagine the people that are sitting in those offices, maybe they should be asked this question. We've heard that Native American art is not art. I mean, we've heard that. It's not art. It's a craft. It's this, it's that.
Yeah.
But now, the conversation is changing, and it's a good thing. It's a good thing. You're seeing a lot of women artists that should have had their work long time ago in a lot of these institutions. Unfortunately, some are no longer with us, but their art is still alive, and it's finally getting the audience that it deserves. So I can only look forward and say that the doors are opening for all women, and for Native American women especially.
And
Our women's work really needs to be seen.
I think I would add one more thing that I think the timely recognition is always appreciated. You don't have to, women don't have to live past half a century to finally get the recognition that they deserve all their life. This has been the case. Mostly, we end up like finding out about somebody who's been working all their life, and all of a sudden, when they're in their 60s, they're discovered by the world. So, I think they deserve to kind of, have enough time so that they can enjoy both working and enjoying the fruits of the labor. And hopefully this will also be something that will change.
But to that end, one of the things that I enjoy doing in my role as a researcher is also taking things like the brochure for this exhibit and using that as source material or accents on Wikipedia. And whether it is creating new articles on Wikipedia about quilters or other women artists. Now after this, of course, I'm going to go and see if both of you two have a reference to this exhibit on your Wikipedia pages, because that's something you can't do yourself.
Yeah.
But when people not in academia are looking for information about Indigenous artists and so forth, they're going to go to Google. So not academia, but just regular folks are probably going to go to Google, they're going to go to YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. And we're there, but I like to make sure that we're also on Wikipedia with the references, because Wikipedia is in the top 10 websites worldwide and in multiple languages. So I think part of our being remembered, not only in museums and in collections and in exhibits, is also being remembered in markers like a Wikipedia or maybe non-traditional places.
That's a really interesting point. Yeah. So thank you, ladies. I think what I would like to do right now is just hop over to the chat quickly and pose a few of these questions from the audience. And then if we still have time, I'd love to loop back to some other questions that I still have, if everybody is willing and able to do that. Does that sound good to everyone? Okay, wonderful. So, so Laura asks, how did the Fenimore obtain this quilt? And then also asked, how long have we had Black Barbie, and how did we acquire that as well? So I think both pieces, perhaps, Carla's and also Kyra.
Carla, do you want to go first?
Sure. Gosh, how did they obtain it? I was asked by Pete Jameson. He was an invited curator for the Fenimore, and he had asked 3 textile artists to put our work in there. And I think most of my work at the time had to be borrowed from different institutions. And this one, I believe I had just finished it not too long ago, like when he had asked. So I told him, I said, I have one that's fairly new and no one has seen it yet. I said, do you want to include it? So that's how that ended up at the Fenimore. And when they saw it, they had asked if it was available. And I'll be honest, should it have stayed maybe in Canada? I always ask myself that, where should it go? And I thought, okay. I have so much respect for the Fenimore, and I know that they are an incredible institution, and dealing directly with Ava, who I just love. I just admire her so much. I knew just by speaking with Ava, and I knew it found the right place. And to know that your work is going to be somewhere long after you are gone, and they will continue to tell that story. Yeah, I think that it's the best place for it to be.
Nice.
Glad for that.
And that's, I think I have parallels with you in some respects, Carla. For Black Barbie, Gretchen Soren, who was with the graduate program there at the Fenimore, curated an exhibit of Black imagery, and she included someplace she saw Black Barbie on exhibit someplace, and she called to have it included in the show. And I have to admit, because remember, I have a day job, right? So when I came up and I saw the exhibit, and I was right across from a Norman Rockwell, and Faith Ringgold was in there, man, I was just blown away. And then I was asked if the piece was available to be acquired. And so the Fenimore was the first museum to purchase one of my quilts. So, and I am so thankful. My quilts are now in other museum collections, but I have to say, the Fenimore has done an outstanding job of traveling Black Barbie and having it included in other venues. That I'm grateful because, Carla, I think you've hit it. Having something that's going to be around 10, 20, 50, 75 years from now, in some ways can only happen when an institution says, we would be honored to be the caretaker of this. And so that's how Black Barbie got to the Fenimore.
Awesome. Thank you. There's another question from Barbara. She is curious about the art piece behind you, Ambreen.
So it's a piece that's not finished yet because it's waiting for a place where it needs to be installed. So it's a piece that I started during pandemic, and after that George Floyd incident. So I kind of, we were all very much trapped in the house, and but I did go out in the, protests after the, with our masks on, and Texas gets really hot here, like, 100 something degrees in the summer. So I remember it was a hot, very, very hot day. We were out there, and at that rally, somebody came in and we basically we kind of literally tried to kind of literally try to kind of do what George Floyd went through. So there was an activist on the stage, and he spoke the words that were coming out of George's mouth when he was under attack by the police. So we had, masks on, it's 100 degrees, and literally we had to lay down on the floor, very close to the floor. I'm asthmatic. I couldn't breathe, just like that, just trying to, and it just had a very strong impact on me. So I came back home and I said, my studio is a place where I try to make sense of things that happen out in the world. So, and then, here we are trapped, there's nothing we could do out there. So I started asking people, like, what do you do when you're in such a darkness? Like when you're, do you have any words? Is there anything that lifts up your spirit that brings you out of that phase? So people send me different things. Some people send me poems. Some people send me just like some phrases, words, and I'd take each piece, and it's printed on different color paper. There are some blacks that are black paper, also black text on black paper downstairs in my first floor. Then we cut them in small little strips, and then the strips is kind of turn into this sort of like a lantern, like a light. So it's still in making. I explained what it is, but I'll post pictures once it's installed somewhere, once it's finished. It's kind of, I still consider it incomplete because it's not. So when you come close to these, they're all words. You can actually read them. Maybe I should pick one, and bring it to the cameras and show you what it is. But yeah, that's one of my studio walls.
What is the material?
Paper.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like a paper mache?
No, just paper. I just have to show you. Give me one second.
It looks like a balloon, like you've written on a balloon from the camera. Look at that. That's fabulous.
Yeah. So each thing has like something from one person, and then hopefully they'll have some sound and light when they're installed.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I would like to pose another question to each of you. So the curators of the exhibition split the show into 3 themes, and one of them is I Am Myself, showcasing self-portraits and explorations of identity. So Kyra, your piece, Black Barbie, is in that section. So do you want to talk a little bit about, you already kind of touched on this earlier, I think you did,
Yeah.
but how your piece relates to the theme of identity?
May I show you another quilt that's maybe appropriate for identity? Because it is me. There's a quilt that was recently acquired by the Smithsonian African American Museum, and it's called I Count, which if Kevin has the photograph that he can show, I, especially living in the Washington, D.C. area and presidential elections and so forth, I definitely count. And this evening is going to be really interesting with the debate, the first debate of this season. In terms of identity, that was me when I was on Weight Watchers. I don't look like that now, but that was definitely during my Weight Watchers period. And it's more, I want to be able to vote. I want my vote to count. I want my voice to count. In politics, in my community, in the United States. And that's how I've interpreted that. So that's where I see, and Black Barbie is the same thing. At work, I want my voice to count when I'm working on a product line. I need to keep my job because I have to pay my rent. But I use the quilting at that point in my life to be angry and to say something when I couldn't necessarily say it publicly otherwise. And then one last thing, I never had the expectation that any of my work would be shown or in a museum or collected by a museum. All my quilts, this first several years that I quilted, were on my bed. They were just my expression. And so I always think it's wonderful that I feel honored that you guys get to see and I get to have this opportunity to show you my work because it was always intended just to be on my bed.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks, Kyra.
Sure.
There's another section. The second section of the exhibition is called Sisterhood and Community. And that's honoring the networks of support that women artists create to empower one another. So Carla and Ambreen, both of your pieces are in that section. So would you like to each talk about how your works relate to this idea, this concept of sisterhood and community?
I think I did touch on it a little bit when I was explaining the works, my work, that it's this one thing when the artists, when they do their work, they have a different, whatever is going on in their head. And, once the work is made, it's out, it's really interesting. It's very educational for artists as well to hear to see the work through a different lens, like how the curators see it or the writers see it, or, or the viewers see it and what they, so, well, I think what I'm thinking is, in terms of the themes of sisterhood, even though this particular work, it does kind of fit in the sense that uh, the work, is exploring the themes of delicacy and collective identity, and through the systematic kind of mark making, and like how this narrative in the work moves from the group unity that empowers these female uh, to kind of individual sort of vulnerability by the end of the series. So I think that's how I see the work being connected in this, and the image of the ladybugs as well, like how it is delicate, one, and then together, like, how, but I also, in this particular work, it's not only just, personally for me, it's not only just the unity and the sisterhood, it's also, uh, it shows the other side too, that it could also be infestation and kind of, uh, if it's taken into the wrong, if the intentions are in the wrong place. So, but mostly I think that's how I see the work fit in the category. So, I don't know.
And then Carla.
First of all, I can't wait to see this exhibit. I saw the list of works, and it was incredible. It just blew me away. I went, oh my gosh, I can't wait to get there to see it. And in terms of where my work was placed in sisterhood and community, um, definitely community. Um, in the list of works, I had a chance to see the Growing Thunder ladies, Juanita and Joyce. I saw DY Begay. These are good friends of mine, and I was surprised, not surprised, because I know their work, and their works are amazing, and I was just elated. I was so happy to see their work in there. There's DY, and also the Growing Thunder ladies. And what the viewer has to realize with Indigenous women is we can't go to an art school to learn this. This is passed down through generations. There is no degrees. There is no art schools that can teach us this work. DY, that was passed down to her. The Growing Thunder ladies, you cannot learn that work anywhere. That is passed down. The baskets that are in there, the pomo baskets that are in there. There is Nampeo's pottery. You just cannot learn that anywhere. So when we say community, this work is the beadwork, the quill work, how to make the cradle boards, the baskets. When Nampeo's work, people don't realize, like, her work, that's all hand coiled work. Her paints are mixed from plants. This is an art form. All of these ladies work at the highest level. That the degrees, there is no degrees for artwork in these. And we pass down this to our future generations that are coming. This pottery still exists today, this form of pottery. They're still doing this. The beadwork, the different techniques. There is the Growing Thunder ladies have like the flat beadwork Iroquois women, especially Mohawk women from Ganawage, we have a raised form of beadwork. It's like a three-dimensional, and you're not going to find that anywhere else. So our art forms are cultivated early on. So for it to be in this community, I think it was a perfect place for it to be. And please go and see this exhibit. For the viewer, oh my gosh, you will just the work that's in there, the women's work that's in there, all of it. I just it's breathtaking. That's all I can say. It's breathtaking.
So, Carla, where are you based?
I'm out of Ganawage Mohawk community.
Okay.
Our community is directly across from Montreal,
Oh,
but we are not Canadian.
yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
we don't say that we're Canadian, neither do we say we're Americans. We
Yeah.
say that we're Mohawks.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's who we are.
Yeah.
So Carla, actually, what you were just speaking about, it segues beautifully into the third section of the exhibition, which is legacy and lineage, and how creative practices are passed down and techniques are passed down through multi-generational relationships. So, question for all of you is, who are the women in your life that you look up to? Who are the artists that preceded you that you've taken inspiration from? Any or either of those questions. I put it to you.
I'll go.
Okay.
Sure. I mentioned Faith Ringgold, a tremendous inspiration. And she also had a foundation, the Anyone Who Can Fly Foundation, where she gave fellowships to people to document artists. And one year I did win a fellowship, or was given a fellowship to write about a quilter. So Faith Ringgold, Sonia Boyce, who is British, Caribbean British,
Yeah.
a phenomenal painter. She's doing more maybe visual work today, but in the 80s when I lived in London for a year, I didn't realize it was during the Black Arts movement. I just know that when I walked into a gallery and saw one of her solo shows, I cried. I'd not seen self-portraits and Black families painted like that. And I just cried, and I've just been a fan of her since then. And then I think finally, a woman by the name of Questa Bembury. She's passed away several years ago now, and she was an authority on quilt patterns, an African-American woman, authority on quilt patterns. And she was the one who said I needed to start writing about and documenting quilting, that it wasn't enough for me just to be an artist, that I had to write about us and write the stories and document the stories. And she's the one who pushed me. So those are the three that I think have influenced me.
Awesome. Ambreen?
I mean, I definitely, when I was in grad school, I discovered Sonia Voice
Oh.
during the time. It really opened up a whole new world for me to look at my own self. It helped me identify myself in this new place or new culture wherever I was. So she was one of the earliest influence, and Mona Hatoum certainly was another artist. But I want to mention one of my mentors, a great friend who I've known now for almost 30 years. It's my friend Mari Magdalena Campos Pons, this Cuban American artist who I admire as a person of high morals and generosity, who's helped me in every step of my way in my professional life, motivated me, inspired me, influenced me, from my grad school till now. And Magda received her MacArthur Fellowship last year, and I've known Magda for almost for the past 30 years, and I would say that she's been a genius of an artist since I've known her, since she was in her 30s. But you know, she finally got recognized. This was, I think 30 years ago it would have been her. So she's one of my big kind of inspiration, and somebody that I look up to, in my professionally and even personally, and of course my mom. She's not an artist, but for many other reasons that she has helped me to continue my art even in the times when I just thought, oh, maybe I will just give it up and I'll stay at home. But so that kind of support is very, very essential and important. Yeah, so.
Sure is. And Carla?
Uh, for me, it's actually a no-brainer. From the late 1880s right up until the 1950s, there was a group of women that created this beadwork industry, and they sold beadwork. Our community was renowned for this beadwork trade, and this was run by women in our community. They were pretty much the breadwinners at times when there was a depression. The depression when there was no work, the women carried it on in the communities and sold beadwork. So there's been so much written about the women of our community in this trade. I had great aunts that were part of this trade. So as a child, I got to see, didn't know what at the time, you don't know what you're looking at, you just know that they're doing beadwork. A little did I know later on what it actually meant. And so I was always blown away by these women. They were just ahead of their time. Contemporary women today, I mean, I have to say names like Shelley Nero. She's a Mohawk out of Brantford, Ontario. The woman can do everything. She is just amazing. There is Norma Howard, a good friend of mine that just recently passed away, and I didn't have a chance to, see her. But what an incredible watercolor artist. She did the most amazing paintings of the Choctaw people, and she documented Choctaw life through her watercolor paintings. And then there's Terry Greaves. She's a Kiowa woman, and the same thing. She's just documenting the stories of her people. All of their work is just inspires me, makes me want to go on and just to do more work and say, what are the stories that I can tell? And like Kyra, my work was, I didn't see my work intended to be in institutions. I started out doing baby quilts for the endless amount of baby showers that I attended. And then there was all functional quilts that I would do. And then I just started telling stories through the work. I've never, to this day, I've never reached out to any organization with my work. They kind of just found where they should be. And that's how I look at it. They're going to go where they're meant to go. And yeah, that's how I see the work. Wherever they're meant to go, they're going to go.
That's great. So I see that we have one more question here from the audience. We are just basically out of time here, but I would love to put this out there. And actually, it's a great question to end on, which is, what is inspiring you all now? and what's going on in the world that you want to have a voice?
I don't mind answering that. What's always inspired me, and that's where my start on putting my voice out there was the world in which we live, and that's our environment. We've taken her for granted, and we are pretty much abusing her so much. I hope that there are more works out there that speak to the environment that we're living in today with this climate change. People really, really need to take this serious. It's not a joke. It's not, I don't know how we can bang our heads anymore to try and have people wake up. But for me, that always was, and even more pressing now, is environment.
Ambreen?
I'm just continuing from my the previous series. I had worked on a series called Say My Name, which is about the child victims of drone strikes in during the War on Terror, and then kind of moved the series to a new series which is called Lay Bare My Arms, which in which I was investigating the reinterpretation of the Second Amendment, and then again war and violence against the most vulnerable of the society, which are the children. So for me, most of my work deals with kind of these issues because I see the world through the lens of motherhood. And, that's why I end up like just kind of getting, so I know there's so much going on in the world. It's just like very heartbreaking at the moment, but all that my eyes are seeing and my ears are hearing, and it's just all coming and out in my studio. I'm working on it with whatever's happening right now in Gaza and in even within our country. So it's just like I think everything is connected.
And for me, it's the documentation, like I mentioned before. So where I can, whether it's publishing articles or books or simple edits to Wikipedia, that's where I'm trying to focus time to make sure that we're represented.
Yeah. And that there's a record.
There is a record.
Yeah.
I count.
Yeah.
That's our legacy, right?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Documentation and the stories. I think we all do the documentation with whatever we witness. It's all documented, and that's what we're leaving behind.
Yes.
Right. So okay.
Well, Ambreen, Carla, and Kyra, this has been amazing. I was always taught, listen and you'll learn, and that is so true tonight. So thank you so much. I see a lot of very enthusiastic thank yous in the chat here. So we're just so grateful to the three of you for participating in this discussion and for sharing your insight and your inspiration with all of us. It really means a lot to hear the artist's perspective. So grateful to you for your time and for being a part of the As They Saw It exhibition. I'd also like to say a special thank you again to the Art Bridges Foundation for its support of the educational programs associated with the As They Saw It exhibition. And I would like to give a special shout out to Fenimore Art Museum's Manager of Arts Education, Kevin Gray. Kevin has been behind the scenes on this program, but it really couldn't have happened without him. So thank you, Kevin. And to our audience, Fenimore Art Museum will present one more installment of the Fight for Recognition, a series of discussions live on Zoom. On July 25th at 7 p.m., we will talk to art historians and critics specializing in women's art. We also have a host of other programs to complement as they saw it, including art making workshops and process art workshops and Celebrate Native America, which is a multidisciplinary festival featuring extraordinary women artists. To learn more about these programs and so much more, please visit our website, fenimoreartmuseum.org. Again, thank you so much for joining us this evening. We hope to see you at Fenimore Art Museum very soon.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for having us. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.